Los Angeles Times critic Michael Wilmington told us there's always room for fancy trash, and this movie about a gang of punk vampires terrorizing the new kids in town seems capable of providing some. Then the characters open their mouths. Nigel Floyd of Time Out said, directed with a cavalier disregard for intelligibility, this has to be one of the most anemic vampire flicks ever made. And Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian noted that this film, in its artless way, asks us to consider that being forever young isn't a sweet Edwardian evocation of innocence, but a vision of pure hell, like vampirism. On this episode of Ruined Childhoods, we decide the fate of the Lost Boys.
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be?
It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters. Those are maggots you're eating. They're maggots, Starfighters.
Are they worms now?
What's the matter? It's just rice.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
It's Ruined Childhoods.
Hey, John, how's it going?
Hey, Dan. It's going okay. I have like the day kind of off from work, although I'm getting a bunch of emails that I'm sure I'm going to have to respond to. And we are leading up to a 3-day weekend for the 4th of July, which when you have a young child is just like other work. So...
yeah, exactly.
So this is my day off. This is my weekend.
Well, thank you for spending part of your weekend chatting with me about some Joel Schumacher flicks. And a happy 4th of July.
Yeah, July. Yeah, a little behind the curtain. We're doing a double header. We're recording our next episode right after this. So that's why you're not going to hear any like current event news, especially on the next one.
And ironically, during the daylight, we're talking about this one.
Ooh, very much so.
Though
Definitely.
It is a cloudy day here in Seattle.
Same here in Portland. So we're talking about the Lost Boys on this episode, but Dan, do you have anything you wanted to mention about our last episode, The Running Man?
Oh, so some one more things. Actually, I've got some one more things and just like some news. So, and actually, it's it's going back to Hollywood Shuffle, but it's brief.
Okay.
Just about one more thing, because in recent days, as of now, when we're recording this on July 2nd, there's been a lot of change especially in animation, and a lot of white actors who were voicing characters that were people of color have stepped down from those roles and have asked that those roles be cast with with people of color.
Yeah, well, we touched on this topic a little bit on the last episode with, shows like 30 Rock removing episodes with blackface, and it's along the same lines with anime in voice actors. And the conversation kind of got started, I don't know, maybe a year ago. Was it a year ago? Maybe not even, with Hank Azaria stepping down as the voice of Apu on The Simpsons.
Yeah, I mean, that's within the past year, it went from him changing his viewpoint to him stepping down. I don't fault Hank Azaria at all. I think he, things have changed. We talked about this all the way back to episode 1, Short Circuit.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Fisher Stevens. So, yeah, it's definitely been a really interesting time. And of course, there's a lot of people who are Black who are saying like, this isn't exactly what we were asking for.
Right. Yes. No. This is not the, the winds of change. This is a slight breeze of alteration, not a wind of change.
Not a full-on Scorpions song.
Oh, so I love that song.
Another thing, and this is an extreme one, where in the episode of The Golden Girls where Blanche and Rose are wearing mud masks, and there is a reference to them not wearing blackface, but being black.
Mm-hmm.
And that was removed. And that's the one where most people are just like, I think that one could have stayed. We could have kept that one. It's certainly not offensive in the way that a lot of other things have been.
The sad thing is that a lot of what this means and a lot of the disclaimers that are being added is that the general audience in America is no longer trusted to understand context.
Right. Although Mad Men is not taking down the episode where Roger Sterling wears blackface.
But they're adding an advisory.
Oh, are they adding an advisory? I didn't see that.
No, they're adding. No. This is what prompted this. This was the Twitter discussion of the day when I was on Twitter and decided to engage, and which normally about film and TV I feel pretty safe, but that was the conversation about Mad Men, and I just felt like, wow, it's sad because I feel like our education, it comes back to the education system, and which I'm a part. So
this is true,
but this is part of why I teach the way I teach is to I teach a full unit on satire. My students have to create satire. They have to recognize satire because satire can be very powerful, but it can also be taken in the wrong, taken out of context. It's so anyway. And then I'm seeing myself going back into discussions we've already had, but I have another one more thing along a much more fun note.
Before you move on to that, I just want to say, I'd love to know what Robert Townsend thinks of all this. And as far as I can tell, he hasn't tweeted about anything. But I'd love to hear the perspective of somebody who was very influential in Black cinema and pop culture earlier on. Certainly not.
And commenting on representation as in 1987, if not before.
I'd love to hear what he thinks. That's all.
Oh, me too. That's a great point. And I would, if anybody has a connect to Robert Townsend, please have him email us at ruinedchildhoodspod@gmail.com.
That's the one.
So, and my other one more thing for Hollywood Shuffle was just, I remember we were talking about like the fictional Oscar nominations and movies like The Naked Gun 33 1/3 that have that fictional Oscars. And I was trying to remember one. It was Private Parts.
Oh, really?
It was Private Parts, at the end of Private Parts, when like Howard Stern wins the Oscar and comes down in his fart man costume, like from the beginning of the movie. So that was it was like Harrison Ford, Robert De Niro. Yeah.
Is that the first time where Paul Giamatti played
a guy who tried to ruin someone's career?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm trying to think if it goes back further than that.
No, that was, so Paul Giamatti, we remember him, of course, from, I think, his screen debut as guy making out in Cafe in Singles. Where like Campbell Scott's kind of like looking over at him and Paul Giamatti just looks up and goes like, what? And then like keeps making out with the girl. And then he was in My Best Friend's Wedding. Okay. I feel like he had a nice like featured role. He had like one scene with Julia Roberts in a hotel hallway. And I remember seeing that movie, and that movie came out not long after Private Parts. So I remember seeing that movie and being, it's pig vomit. And,
right.
Because that was the nickname for his character in Private Parts. So funny movie that I think some of it, in light of the Me Too movement, is less. I don't enjoy it as much because it's exploitative. But
totally,
yeah. But there's elements of that movie that I find really inspirational. I mean, the element of him kind of deciding like, look, I have to be me and I have to do my thing and let the cards fall where they may. So,
and I think that if today he was making the same movie, he probably would have approached it in a different way, even though at the time that everything was taking place, that's how he was. That's what he did. So
Yeah, I mean, we know we not only grew up in the New York area, but our father was a devoted and is still a devoted Howard Stern. Still? Yeah, I mean, do you remember Dad had all like the Howard Stern VHSs? He kept them all at work, but
well, it's if you look at his bookshelf in our childhood home, it's all about like dead presidents and
Howard
World
Stern.
War I, and then there's Howard Stern.
More World War II, but.
That's true.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and then the rest is devoted to Howard Stern. And it's just multiple copies of like what his two or three books. And there's like the paperback copies and like, anyway. So if you're ever looking to read a copy of Private Parts and your local library is still closed and you live near Cranford, New Jersey, email us at ruinchildhoodspod@gmail.com and we will put you in touch with our dad. So, and then my only other one more thing was on the music of 1987 when I was citing the music on the boardwalk was not Cameo, it was the Whispers' Rock Steady.
Oh. Wow.
Steady.
Yeah.
I throw that in there. Man.
Okay. I'm totally
now you remember as we're hitting the frogs with the mallets and the frogs. Yeah.
This is a thing that nobody would understand what we're talking about. But anyway,
it's like our only family vacation video. It's it's an artifact. So
you're totally right. But speaking of the movies or the music of 1987, we talked about Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now, which was, I don't know if it was recorded and written for the movie Mannequin, but it was definitely.
It would not have been Oscar nominated had it not been.
That is true. And so I just wanted to briefly bring up the movie Mannequin because one of the prominent characters in that movie is Hollywood Montrose, a window dresser, and also, I mean, that's what the main character does. Is he's a window dresser at a department store, much like the early life of Joel Schumacher, who was a window dresser at a department store. So, Dan, do you see what I'm doing here? Do you see what I'm doing?
Are you saying that Joel Schumacher was the inspiration for Meshack Taylor's performance as Hollywood Montrose?
Hollywood Montrose?
In Mannequin and Mannequin 2 on the Move?
No, I'm just trying to start getting us into talking about Joel Schumacher.
I mean, well, okay, so Joel Schumacher, Pour One Out.
Yeah.
I mean, a storied career, and when you think about the films, I would say particularly of the 80s, there's this school of directors who I feel like nowadays those directors would make a film that would get them nominated for an Oscar. And I'm talking about your Joel Schumachers, I'm talking about your Richard Donners, your Ivan Reitmans, these directors who made these just hit after hit after hit. And really, and like good movies, quality movies. Richard Donner, Superman
Goonies.
the movie, Goonies. I mean, where do you the Lethal Weapon series?
Sure, and Richard Donner, who was a producer on The Lost Boys, was I think originally supposed to direct, but then ultimately went on to do Lethal Weapon. If I'm not mistaken, that's kind of the trajectory of how the story goes. But that's how it went to Joel Schumacher, and Richard Donner was on as a producer.
Which is interesting because I see in watching The Lost Boys, I saw such a like not an actual connection. I don't to the Goonies.
Well, but the original script, or maybe not the original, but when it was in Richard Donner's hands, was supposed to be more like the Goonies plus vampires. It was supposed to be... So the
Monster Squad?
Well, yeah. It was supposed to be younger kids, but not just Dracula himself, but,
right.
this group of vampires. So anyway, this was originally supposed to be, 10-year-old kids with vampires. And then when it went into Joel Schumacher's hands, that's when it became the St. Elmo's Fire plus vampires, where it's, a bunch of late teens, early 20s, that age of vampire. And you have this like, sexy, hunky vampire vibe rather than
like rock,
the Goonies.
Punk rock vampires.
Yeah.
They're really... like just these cool hair metal vampires, and they're so, and that so we're talking about Joel Schumacher, and we're talking about, and I think that what we're talking about with all these movies is kind of what defines a Joel Schumacher film and what is the definitive Joel Schumacher film.
Right. And a lot
I'm not saying we're answering that today.
No, and if you would have asked me a few months ago what movies I thought of when I heard the name Joel Schumacher, I probably would have gone to like Batman Forever, because it is the, like, when I think of him, I think of that flash and that pop. But then when you go back and look at some of the other movies he's done, and you come to a movie like Falling Down, and it's like something that has like a haze over it, and there's like no color, then it really makes you think like maybe this person actually does have more to him than just the like flash and pop of a Batman Forever.
I agree. And I think that if you took, when I was watching The Lost Boys on this recent, rewatch of it, I thought to myself, man, I wish that Joel Schumacher's Batman was like this. That style, that with Kiefer Sutherland's vampire face coming out of the shadow. Like, imagine a Joker. Like, imagine, like, I mean, Kiefer Sutherland, because why not? Because Joel Schumacher worked with him enough. Imagine like a Kiefer Sutherland Joker with that face coming out of the darkness. And I think that Joel Schumacher really could have not necessarily taken on Burton's style, but continued much more in the vein of Tim Burton than he ended up doing, which I think for a long time I've always blamed him for that. And in watching The Lost Boys and in looking again at Falling Down, and, we're going to be talking about some others, and, Flatliners, he really has a taste for that darkness, that shadow, where there's always that steam or that smoke coming up from the damp sidewalk. He really does have that atmosphere. And like you said, he's a window dresser. He knows how to make things look good. And man, I think The Lost Boys, that's one thing I think contributes to a real Joel Schumacher movie, is that sense of youth and transition, whether it's St. Elmo's Fire, where they're in that, like, they're trying to find themselves as adults. Yeah. Which is also The Lost Boys, but The Lost Boys, they're trying to find themselves, Sam and Michael are trying to find their way through divorce and living in a new town.
Well, why don't I hop into a synopsis, and then everyone else can kind of meet us where we are if they're not familiar with The Lost Boys. Okay. Michael, Sam, and their mother Lucy moved to Santa Carla, a beach town said to be the murder capital of the world, to live with Lucy's father after a bitter divorce from Michael and Sam's father. Not before long, Michael is enchanted by a girl around his age named Star, who introduces him to a group of mysterious guys led by head weirdo David. Meanwhile, Sam befriends the Frog Brothers, comic book store kids who warn Sam about the vampires around town. Though he finds it silly at first, Sam begins to notice strange things happening, especially with his brother and his mom's new boss/beau, Max. As Michael gets deeper into life with his friends, he learns that they are vampires and that they're recruiting him to join their crew. Sam and the Frogs use Michael to lure David and his vampire friends to their murder lair, where they plan to kill David, who they believe to be the head vampire, because if you kill the head vampire, the other half vampires, which I'll get into in a moment, will become human again. When they kill David and Michael is still a vampire, it is revealed that Max is the head vampire, whose plan was to turn the entire family and to have Lucy as the matriarch to his vampire brood. All plans are foiled when Lucy's crazy father smashes through the house and impales Max with a fence post. So this kind of half vampire thing, I think, is kind of unique to the Lost Boys in the world of vampire lore, where basically what happens is if somebody drinks the blood of the head vampire, they are in this transitional stage, which is where Michael is. And if once they make their first kill, that's when they become full vampire. So Michael and Star, along with a little kid, are still like half vampires, and there's still hope for them.
Yeah, Laddie, who for the longest time I could not tell Laddie, male, female, kind of has like a little mini werewolf look.
What does it matter?
And no, it doesn't. But I mean, when I was watching this movie, when it first came out, not in the theater clearly because I was like 10, but on HBO, whatever 6 months later, back then I'm just like, is that a boy? Is that a girl? It didn't matter. It didn't.
Yeah, but when you're an 11-year-old kid, that's what you wonder about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, in that moment. So, by the way, and I would say this should get a primetime spot on the Practical FX lineup.
Oh, yeah. Our network, Practical FX.
Practical FX, man. They did. And I was reading some of the behind the scenes on this. And what's cool is I don't know how you watched The Lost Boys. Do you own a copy or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I own a copy as well. And I don't know about yours, but mine is like from the first issue DVDs.
Oh, okay.
It was like Warner Brothers DVDs with like the cardboard covers.
Yeah.
And the, you flip on one side, it's full screen. And it doesn't have a behind the scenes featurette, but what it has are screens, basically.
Okay.
And I thought I would share some of what these say.
Oh, yeah.
And I will post these on our Instagram as well, but just to give you a sense, if you, grab an old DVD that came out like in 1997, like one of the first DVDs, and you'll see one of these. So it says, for director Joel Schumacher, a movie about vampires represented a marked departure from previous films, but, quote, I sensed that with this picture, I could have fun without becoming camp. And he said he thought that there would be a chance to do something original that enjoyed a time-honored tradition. So maybe that's where he's talking about the added twist to to the vampire legend, which I have another question to ask about that. But he also said that he was inspired by, so his inspirations were the Anne Rice series, the Interview with the Vampire series.
Oh, Anne Rice, who we talked about on the last episode. No, that was Anne Rule.
That was Anne Rule. So, and all other influences include Werner Herzog's 1979 Nosferatu, John Badham's 1979 Dracula.
Cool.
And the 1983 film The Hunger, directed by Tony Scott, which co-stars.
I never saw The Hunger.
It is a good, atmospherically, I get it, like the balance of shadow and light. And so, I'm not going to read all of these, but in speaking about light and darkness, and this is something that I really caught on this viewing of the film. And then when I read this, I was like, oh God, I'm smart. I'm like, I got you, Joel Schumacher. But that even the daytime scenes have that sense of danger, like where you see the missing, the posters of the missing
kids. Yeah.
It's not like you're watching the Steel Pier and Boardwalk Empire and families strolling the boardwalk.
Right.
Strolling the Midway.
Yeah. And I mean,
it's
also,
dangerous.
Santa Clara is not your typical like beach town. It's filmed in Santa Cruz, but this is a fictional town of Santa Clara. Is it Santa Clara? No, Santa Carla.
Santa Carla.
Santa Carla. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Santa Clara is real.
Is real. I think that when I typed it in, it auto corrected to Santa Clara.
You're not the first. I'm sure you won't be the last.
Santa Carla is it's a fringy beach town. It is the murder capital of the world. It's filled with different types of, counterculture. You have your punks, you have surf Nazis. There's, a lot of really, fringy people around there. And it's not your typical like tourist trap.
I think one of the points of this movie, I was reading an article in the Atlantic from a few years ago, written by Brandon Tensley for on the occasion of the 30th anniversary of The Lost Boys. And, I'll paraphrase him, but he's talking about how The Lost Boys is coming out at this time when those like Reagan era values are really getting pumped into the zeitgeist, to pop culture. And it's the traditional, it's less about like that rugged individualism, more about the family, the nuclear family. And Lost Boys shows people who are outside of that mainstream, which, coming from Joel Schumacher, who's probably one of the few openly gay directors working in certainly working in like mainstream studio Hollywood. I mean, John Waters is working.
Right, but not in super mainstream Hollywood.
No, he's not making a tentpole flick for Warner Brothers. No. And I think what Joel Schumacher is finding this, just great way of doing is putting, I guess, his experience of trying to fit in while also trying to be himself. It speaks a lot to Michael's experience where he's, especially when he's the half vamp.
Sure.
He wants to fit in with David and these guys, mostly because of Star.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, he's got like, they drive their motorcycles. He drives his motorcycle.
Right. There's every reason why he should be attracted to these people, and Star being the thing that draws him to them. Yeah. And I mean, as we learn at the end, Max spotted them and is just like, get them.
And what's awesome about Max is played by Edward Herman.
Yeah.
Pour one out. We got pour one out for Coreys Haim too.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah. So what I love about the character of Max is that Max is so establishment. He is wearing the most 1987 with like the like just kind of crazy patterns.
Yeah. He owns the local video store. He has this like really shishi, very 80s house.
He's got that. Yeah. Well, he's got a house that has like a moat, which, eventually we discover why. Right. But aside from the fact that you have Lucy, who's kind of looking to fill that.
Dianne Wiest. Amazing.
Dianne Wiest playing a divorcee. Typecast.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is before Parenthood.
Right. So. But this is what set the standard, I guess, for Dianne Wiest's trajectory.
But I love it. But also, I mean, similarities to the character. She's this, a former hippie.
Yeah.
Who's now, she's got 2 kids and she's really doing her best to take care of them. And she's going out to get a job. She's not going to,
she doesn't waste any time
off grandpa. No, she doesn't waste any time. And, this guy sticks out like a sore thumb in Santa Carla because he's very, 1987 and very like, the latest styles and like Benetton and whatever. So, he's wearing a Swatch.
Yeah.
So, where she's looking to kind of normalize and Michael's looking to break out and Sam is looking, we have a Corey looking for his other Corey.
This is the first time that they're on screen together. Sam is looking to find his place. He's a comic book kid, so of course he gravitates to the comic book store, but it's not like he sees the Frog Brothers, Edgar and Allan, and is like, these are my people. It kind of happens because it has to happen.
No, he's kind of weirded out by them.
Yeah, totally. And
until he realizes that they're right.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, poor Sam, like that town is not for him.
Well, and that's this other question where that's brought up in this article is that, who are the Lost Boys?
Right. That's interesting.
Is it what Edgar and Allan, which are their parents that are just passed out like junkies in the comic book shop?
I think so. That's what I thought. Yeah.
So basically that's their parents are just strung out. Well, whatever.
Yeah. So yes, they are Lost Boys in a sense. There are the literal Lost Boys, the kids in the, missing flyers and the milk cartons. There's the vampires, which I read somewhere that this script was originally a Peter Pan and Lost Boys vehicle where it's theorizing that Peter Pan doesn't grow up because he's a vampire and the Lost Boys are all vampires.
I remember hearing that.
Yeah. So it's like that is part of the origin of this. And it's like that could have been the title that just never, left once the Peter Pan aspect left because, it fits. And it fits so much that like we don't even think about it. When we're talking about this movie or this movie comes up, and it's like this movie has become a classic, and it stands the test of time. It is a cheesy movie in a lot of ways, but it doesn't feel that way because it is done so well. And I mean, I forget the name of the cinematographer, but like he worked with like Scorsese. I think he did Taxi Driver. Like it's done in a way of like a really good movie, but for all intents and purposes, a lot of people could see this as a kind of a bad movie, but that's what makes it so good.
It's got a lot of humor to it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot, the climactic scene at the end, it's very over the top. You have the guy who gets impaled into the stereo, which they said it took them a day to do that.
You miss, sucker.
Once, pal.
Death by stereo, is that what he says?
Death by stereo.
Yeah.
And it's Michael Chapman is the is the DP on that, who did Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, The Fugitive, among others.
Yeah, The Fugitive.
It's funny, before I got sidetracked, I found a quote from Schumacher where he says, that The Lost Boys is in a way about the fear we have of the other, those who live outside of the mainstream.
Sure. Yeah. Which are the residents of Santa Carla, live outside the mainstream.
So
except for Max in a lot of ways, in the way that he presents.
Yeah.
He presents very mainstream.
Well, and he represents then if you start to look more, I don't know, outside of the box, it's, he's capitalism. He's the video store of 1987. That was like, man, that was the gold mine. You got yourself a video store. Man, if you got the first video store in town, you had a gold mine.
The only video store in town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or on the boardwalk.
Yeah. So, earlier I was talking about kind of my perception that I had, past tense, of Joel Schumacher in the Batman Forever, Batman and Robin aspect, where there's a lot of glitz and shine and sheen, and nothing has more shine and sheen than Tim Cappello, the saxophone player on the boardwalk, which is our kind of like entry into the weird underbelly of Santa Carla. And it's, that's where all the weirdos and freaks come out to this crazy like boardwalk party. And there's this guy who's roided up. He's wailing on his saxophone and singing this song. And, we talked a little bit about Tim Cappello in the last episode. And I, years ago, remember doing a bunch of probably just like Wikipedia research on Tim Cappello. But he found music at a very young age and used that to eventually pull him out of his heroin addiction. He kind of clung onto that instead of heroin in order.
He does not look like he's on heroin in The Lost Boys.
No, he is full of pep.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's just charisma. It's just pure charisma. So yeah,
surging through his biceps.
He was a saxophone player for Tina Turner. He was in the We Don't Need Another Hero music video. And Tina Turner really, encouraged him to explore his wild side in the costumes he would wear, to a point where she actually had to tell him to dial it back a few times, if I remember correctly. He also toured with Ringo Starr, and he was in the All-Star Band. He has appeared in TV shows like The Equalizer and Miami Vice. He's just like kind of been doing stuff for a long time. He recently was on the show The Break with Michelle Wolf, the comedian Michelle Wolf, and there was a segment called Saxophone Apologies, and she talked about the lack of apologies, and this is from Wikipedia. Wolf addressed the lack of apologies from both Bill Clinton and the press for their treatment of Monica Lewinsky in relation to the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. So, like, he would just be playing the saxophone while, talking about people who have overdue apologies to issue. But yeah, Tim Cappello just released an album called Blood on the Reed, and it's his first solo album. And I believe it has the song that he did for the Lost Boys. I think it's called I Still Believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
So shout out to Tim Cappello.
Yeah, definitely.
Good for you for just like doing your thing and I don't know, just like sticking with it and overcoming personal hurdles. And
yeah, man.
Yeah, good for you. He was on a couple of Peter Gabriel albums. He actually toured with Billy Crystal.
Okay.
So there you go.
Great. No, I mean, but you're totally right. Like, he is one of those images that sets the tone for this film.
Also, another thing that pulled him out of his heroin addiction was bodybuilding. So that also...
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so I guess...
Really sets the tone for this movie.
Yeah, and I would say that Joel Schumacher, in terms of setting tone, one of those elements that he uses is the appearance of characters. Mm-hmm. And I know that's, yes, of course, that's common sense, but I think Joel Schumacher really uses that well, where with the Frog Brothers in their like faux Rambo get up.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but I'm so curious to know more about the upbringing of the Frog Brothers. Those characters are highlighted in the Lost Boys sequels. So there's Lost Boys The Tribe and Lost Boys The Thirst, I want to say.
Yeah,
The Thirst.
Did you watch either of them?
No, I couldn't track them down.
No, me neither, but I gotta say, I'm intrigued about The Thirst. The Tribes looks like a remake. It's a remake posing as a sequel.
Yeah.
Which I think Kiefer Sutherland's brother, I think, plays the head vampire. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of just like the dollar store version of The Lost Boys.
But The Thirst sounds like an actual sequel.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? Why don't I just read a
but The Tribe, there's an alternate ending to The Tribe I read that sets up that Sam has since become a vampire, and Edgar has to Edgar kills Sam.
I think because Corey Haim shows up in The Tribe.
Yeah. Like at the end, I think I read.
Yeah, I think he has a small appearance shortly before his passing. So Lost Boys The Thirst, this is just one of the I think user submitted plot summaries on IMDb. In San Cazador, California, the clumsy vampire hunter Edgar Frog is evicted from his trailer, but the bestseller writer Gwen Lieber offers him a job to destroy the head vampire DJ X that promotes worldwide raves to increase his army of undead. Gwen tells that her brother Peter disappeared in Ibiza 2 years ago in an X party promoted by the alpha vampire. Now DJ X is coming to San Cazador to promote a sacrifice during a party in the blood moon on the next Friday, and Edgar discovers that the rave will take place in a slaughterhouse on an island. Gwen hires also the Hollywood participant of reality show Lars von Getz that comes with the cameraman Klaus. Edgar invites his brother Alan to join the team, but he declines, and he teams up with his friend Zoe. When the group finds DJ X, Edgar Edgar discloses a secret about the head vampire. This is a user-submitted plot summary.
Yeah.
It kind of loses track of the focus there.
This is not what I read that intrigued me.
But I think that part of it is that the thirst is referring to a drink or some sort of drug that they take.
Yeah, that's like the lead vampire's blood. And I think there's also something with Congress being infiltrated by vampires.
Really? Oh,
yeah,
boy.
I'm pretty sure I remembered reading that. Yeah, Lost Boys, The Thirst. I'm gonna go straight to the source, to Wikipedia.
You know, and it's funny because some of the things that I read talking about the Lost Boys franchise is that, you know, The Lost Boys is a major motion picture. The other two are, I feel like this term is going to be going away, but straight to video. And I don't mean that just in the sense that, like, what does that even mean anymore? But like, major motion pictures are coming out on streaming platforms now. So it's really just a matter of like big budget versus small budget.
Yeah. Promotion.
Yeah.
Names, people involved.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Like Joel Schumacher was not involved with anything beyond the original Lost Boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was simply just, I guess, Warner saying like, hey, we can sell some DVDs.
Yeah, we can make a couple bucks.
Yeah. So yeah, because The Tribe was 2008 and The Thirst was 2010.
Yeah. So Dan, do you remember your first time seeing The Lost Boys? You just said probably an HBO experience.
Yeah, it was probably HBO. It was probably like, I'm sure I think I taped it off HBO and had the tape. I might have rented it from Blockbuster though. At that like when that came out on VHS, it would have been like early 88, I guess. I would have been a little young to get away with renting that. I probably caught it on. I probably taped it off HBO and
because it was rated R, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, for the violence, of course.
Right.
You know, there's that sex scene with Jami Gertz and Jason Patric, but there's nothing really.
No.
It's just a lot of lace.
Yeah. By the way, Jason Patric is great in this.
The cast, I don't have a problem with anyone in the cast.
No, I think that everyone kind of fits their role perfectly. Corey Haim as the like polished, I don't know, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, whatever.
Well, although, you know what strikes me as what has always struck me as odd is if he's like 12, 13, 14, that scene where he's like taking the bath and like.
Yeah,
but I guess that
50s music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess that kind of establishes him as being, you know, having that innocence.
Yeah. He's just a quirky kid.
And, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about the rules. So that's a question.
And
is
rule?
what
I'm
about
just kidding.
the Anne rule, the Anne Rice rule, the Anne Rice rule. Yeah, your vampires have to be fancy. But what rules do you have to stick by? At what point do we say enough is enough? Is it Twilight's glittery vampires? That's kind of for me. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, no, a vampire goes into the sun. They turn like it affects them. That's
sure.
Like more than just making him sparkle.
Right. Yes. And what also is interesting is that there's always been the rule in vampire lore of a wooden stake through the heart is something that kills them. And I guess in this case, like an antler from a taxidermied deer can also.
Well, I guess
or is it just anything through the heart? I always thought that it was just a wooden stake.
No, anything, because I mean, what in Rudy shoots him with the arrows in Monster Squad?
Yeah, but I didn't. Well, I guess
I guess he makes them.
He makes them. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess that's an interesting. Does bone count? Does like an antler count? What are the?
I guess it does in this world. Yeah.
Like, where do you? Yeah, I mean, how much leeway do you have when you're creating a vampire story to alter those rules?
In the world of the Lost Boys, there is this half vampire situation where they drink the blood of the head vampire, and when the head vampire is killed, then the half vampires are freed or whatever. And I think that is something that as far as I know, is made up for this movie, but it works. And I think it helps it.
I feel like in Bram Stoker's Dracula, it's like, one and done.
Yeah. And I think that's typically the case. Bite to the neck and you're good to go.
Yeah. Although isn't like Keanu half vampire throughout
Is he?
Bram Stoker's Dracula?
Maybe it was like a botched procedure. I don't know.
I don't think it
It only like half did it. I don't remember. I haven't watched that one in a few years.
Yeah. But yeah,
Another movie that
what
came
about
up on the
garlic?
last episode. Well,
what about garlic?
So you're right. Garlic is something that comes up in this one as part of lore of vampires in general, but doesn't seem to have an effect. But Max, I don't know if like head vampires just like are, because he has a reflection.
But it's the other vampire as well. One of the other, I forget which one, but the one who dies in the pool, because the pool's full of holy water that has garlic in it. Because he's just like, garlic doesn't work, and they're like, yeah, but holy water does, and they
So it's funny. So I guess that's one of those things where it's like, oh, garlic is part of vampire lore, but in their world, it's like, no, it's not. That's made up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe that was just the garlic.
About it.
Maybe Bram Stoker had some like stock in the garlic industry and like threw that in there, and he was just like, people are gonna buy shitloads of garlic if I tell them it'll protect them from vampires.
Yeah, right. He had a garlic farm.
I'm never gonna have to write another book again. Stoker's Garlics. And another thing I really like about this movie is it doesn't overstay its welcome.
No, it doesn't. Not at all.
It moves. It gets to where it has to. It gets to where it has to get. The pace is great. The effects. The Michael, when Michael's like flying outside of the house, out of control, and like, I think the humor and the scares blend. Like a lot of the reviews that I was looking over in kind of preparing were kind of just writing it off as being it's like over silly, or the dialogue is over silly.
It's exactly what it needs to be.
I mean, yeah, no, this is not meant to be like, this was not challenging The Last Emperor for the Academy Award that year.
No.
But it holds up, and you can watch it today, and there's not a dip. It's engaging. It's scary when it needs to be scary. It's funny when it needs to be funny.
Yeah. Well, that's what's so great is like, I think it's even just the last line right after the grandpa like kills Max, and he's like, that's the one thing I can't stand about this town.
One thing about living in Santa Carla I never could stomach. All
the damn vampires.
And John, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Dan, are we going to have the same idea?
We might. But first, I do want to point out before we start talking about our ideas that there has been a series, a television series on the CW in the works.
Yeah, and that's probably picking up off the popularity of like Riverdale and Teen Wolf, how those were kind of brought back as teen heartthrob series.
You apply the formula, which is not the direction that.
There was also a comic book series, if I'm not mistaken. I think
are they in the Marvel universe?
I don't know.
Yeah, so John, I don't know about. So I'm guessing was your idea along the lines of a prequel featuring a young post-World War II grandpa?
I wasn't thinking post-World War II. I was thinking like, pre-world 1930s, because I looked up the actor was born in I think 1915. So he'd be kind of at that like, right age to do like a 1930s.
Oh, okay.
Santa Carla.
That's okay. So that's one that's a little different than where I was going.
Because I was also thinking that like, Lucy, Dianne Wiest's character, I was thinking like before she was around, and I figured she probably would have been born sometime in the 40s, maybe early 50s.
I have her being born 1947 to 1950.
Is that
around
Dianne
the time.
Wiest's?
No. I just kind of like did some random math, and that's where I ended up.
Okay.
So let me explain why I want to have it after she's born. Because I think that so first of all, Emerson, we don't know their last name because Emerson, I assume, was her ex's last name.
Right. Yeah.
So
And he's just credited as like grandpa, I think.
He's grandpa. So he's in Santa Carla. Maybe he moves there after the war, and they have Lucy. And whether it's like it's in his lineage to fight vampires, or he discovers the vampires, maybe he's come back from World War II. It's been a few years and he kind of feels like he's like many vets didn't have as much of a purpose, wasn't living an extraordinary life anymore. And they moved to this town of Santa Carla, hoping, okay, maybe a fresh start will liven things up, a new job. And he discovers there are vampires. And he decides he's going to fight the vampires. He does it in disguise to protect his family, which is why in The Lost Boys, not all the vampires really know. However, Max has been around for some time.
Right.
And this is why Max is now wants to get Lucy. So we have an introduction to Max at some point in whether this is a film or a series, and maybe Max is I don't know, younger. Or I guess he would be.
If he's a vampire, he'd be the same.
Well, yeah. So I don't know who you'd cast. I don't. Who's going to pull off an Edward Herman look? Either that or Max just isn't there. But
right.
you have some type of connection that maybe ends up explaining why Max really wants to have Lucy as his like vampire queen, and maybe it's to avenge something that Grandpa did. But he fights secretly, and maybe that's why like he's such a survivalist.
Yeah.
And where we find him, and he's so fried, and he lives like out in the middle of nowhere, and he's so nonchalant about the vampires, but maybe he thinks he's killed them all.
Right. Yeah.
That's what I see.
One reason why I wanted to do it before Lucy was born is the idea that he ends up like falling in love with a vampire woman, or maybe half vampire woman, and perhaps Lucy is the product of that, you know, and that's why Max is attracted to her, is because she has, you know, that in her DNA.
And that's why Michael's into Star.
Yeah. So I found this on the Lost Boys. It's lostboys.fandom.com. It's the like Lost Boys wiki. So here's some information on here about Grandpa. And this, I think, comes from like the comic books and all the other stuff around Lost Boys. So little is known about Grandpa's past before the events of Santa Carla, though he is, or was, an experienced vampire hunter. And I'm just reading this for the first time now.
And I have not read it at all.
He moved to Santa Carla into the Craftsman-style house in Paganip Creek after his daughter Lucy had grown up and left home. He is believed to have died sometime in 1987. Supposedly, he was turned into a half-vampire by the widow Johnson and killed during a raid on her lair. However, accounts of the Johnson raid are somewhat murky. The only chronicler Edgar Frog has admitted he greatly exaggerated his version of events in The Reign of Frogs. So I'm thinking, I think that's a comic book series, The Reign of Frogs, in order to make himself appear more heroic than he really was. Some have come to believe that the Johnson raid is purely a work of fiction, and that Grandpa Emerson simply married the widow Johnson and moved away, and that reports of his death were greatly exaggerated so as to afford him the opportunity to retire from vampire hunting. Personality traits. Grandpa Emerson has a very droll sense of humor. He enjoys marijuana, Oreos, root beer, killing vampires, and stuffing animals. For him, taxidermy is not just a job, it's a labor of love. By the way, this is not in here, but remember how another reason why I was thinking like 30s, I don't know exactly what that car is that he drives, that not the like, you know, 50s car, but there's like that crazy ass car that he drives.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking that like that would be from that era, probably. Anyway,
okay.
Relationships. Grandpa Emerson is the father of at least one child, Lucy Emerson, and the grandfather of at least two children, Michael and Samuel Emerson. He's grandfather of Nicole and Chris Emerson, so that's a thing. Trivia. As The Lost Boys is inspired by Peter Pan, the role of Grandpa is linked with the role of Captain Hook. As the roles are reversed and The Lost Boys are bad in this adaptation, Hook is good. Grandpa shares Hook's mystery and illusion personality. He is often seen plotting And at the end is the one to defeat the head vampire, making it clear that he despises all vampires and was aware the whole time. Interesting.
I find it interesting that on that fan site, they give him the same last name, that they all go by the name of Emerson, which I don't know if that's, right. I don't recall that being revealed anywhere in the film, and him just being called Grandpa.
Yeah, I don't know. Right, so Lost Boys Reign of Frogs is the comic book series. Just look that up real quick. And it is not Marvel, it is Wildstorm Comics.
Okay.
And it was around May 2008 to August 2008. There were only 4 issues. So there you go.
Okay, not easy to break into the comics world, but
interesting that 2008 was the time that the first sequel came out. Wasn't that 2008?
Yeah. I wonder if, they were probably tied in together.
Yeah, probably.
Because I feel like that sequel was kind of to establish the frogs, which, by the way, I think in either prequel, you would have to have the frogs.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
and
shit. What if like the parents of the frogs, who we see as being like burnouts, used to be vampire fighters, but they had an experience that traumatized them so much they just like became junkies. And
yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah,
I like
nice. And I just got to give a shout out, because I don't know if we're ever gonna talk about Twister, but I was watching that movie recently, and it's like it's the last thing I remember seeing Jami Gertz in for the longest time. And watching Jami Gertz, who was like, especially like 1987.
Like a sitcom, maybe? I think she did like a TV show. Anyway, go on.
But to see her in Twister, and she does that kind of little, like over the top, like that Southern accent.
Hey, it's Meg. I gotta go.
I'm going back.
Good. You'll be safe at the motel. I'll see you in the morning.
I won't be there.
What? What are you saying?
I'm saying goodbye.
No.
You know what? I can't compete with this. I wouldn't even know where to start.
Wait, don't do this now, please.
Sooner or later,
please.
It ended. We both know that.
Man, that movie holds up.
I haven't watched Twister in forever. I got to check that one out again.
It's fun. I watched it again recently, and is
Philip Seymour Hoffman kind of like one of the sciencey guys? Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's the other time that Philip Seymour Hoffman played like the Jack Black role.
Along Came Polly. Oh my God, he's so goddamn good in that bad movie.
He is so good. I watched that movie just for him.
His pratfalls are flawless. The scene where he's like playing basketball and he's just like showboating but missing every single shot is so good.
Man.
Oh my God.
Let it rain!
So I did a lot of thinking last night, and there's something I'm pretty excited about.
What's up? Nice. Let it rain!
Well, I feel like I might be ready to move on. Get my life back on track. So, I'm going to ask Polly Prince on a date.
Oh, that's a mistake. She's not right for you, dude. Rain dance!
Hey, you guys want to play some twos?
You know what? Actually, we're kind of in the middle of a conversation.
You douchebags bring your A game? What was that? I'm just messing with you, Sasquatch. Let's get it on. Take it roll! Take it roll! Outlet! Outlet! Rain dance!
Sandy, come on! Sandy! Sandy!
White chocolate!
Sandy!
Raindrops! Old school! T! Time out. I'm burning. My lungs are burning. Time out.
So why do you think Polly's so wrong for me?
You don't even know this girl, Ruben. You haven't seen her since 7th grade.
So, by the way, I feel like it's kind of rare that we both go with prequel, let alone kind of the same idea. But I feel like we very seldom go in the prequel route. This one really calls for it, though.
I will say this, though. I did not think of it until this morning.
Oh, yeah.
As I was just kind of like doing my I went on a little bike ride.
Oh, nice.
Took a little walk, got a little exercise, kind of, stimulate the brain. And and I was like, oh man, I'm like, that would actually be a really good, because otherwise anything else ends up being a remake. It just ends up being like you're basically just repeating the same formula, whereas a prequel allows, and I think that prequel also opens you up for a film or a series, because it might be better to do as a series.
Yeah, and I think that the idea of a Santa Carla pre-vampire, like fringe counterculture, and like seeing how it became what it became. Ooh, here's something interesting. What if Tim Cappello is a vampire and we see kind of the early days of like the saxophone player, like at maybe a jazz club on the boardwalk or something? And I don't know, they'd have to do some de-aging
Tim
or
Cappello has just always been there on that boardwalk playing the saxophone.
Right?
Like adapting to the times.
But I feel like he would be the kind of vampire that eats rats and doesn't want to like eat people. He regrets everything and doesn't.
He'd be more of like a Twilight vampire. He glistens.
He certainly does glisten.
But he glistens in the firelight.
Yeah.
In the moonlight. Tim Cappello is the only vampire that I will accept being glittery.
Absolutely.
And sparkly.
Absolutely. And, it's funny because it's like The Lost Boys, had it not been for The Lost Boys, we probably would not have Twilight.
Or Stranger Things.
It's the, I don't know, the idea of the like hunky modern day teenage vampire kind of really started with this. I mean,
Kiefer.
I could be
the
wrong.
OV.
Kiefer. And also, almost every time I think about Kiefer Sutherland, I think about Jiminy Glick, and I think it might have been the movie Jiminy Glick Goes to La La Wood, but he's like trying to get Kiefer Sutherland's attention. He's like, Kiefer. He's trying to like get an interview on the red carpet, and he's calling it. It's so freaking good.
It's so rare that there's an event of excitement in the world of show business. It's so unusual for people to get dressed up and assemble to celebrate themselves. I think that's what makes this night so very special and unique to its own. Oh, who's there? In the back, I think it's Alanis Morissette. Or it could be Mickey Rourke. Often I get those two confused. That's right, Kiefer. Kiefer Sutherland. That's right, Kiefer. The wonderful Holly Hunter is here tonight, and I can't wait to meet Holly because Holly is someone that my wife Dixie and I have often role-played. She'll be Holly Hunter and I'll be Garth Brooks. And we'll dress up and she'll wear a hoop skirt and sometimes I will. Kiefer. Oh, Kiefer's coming back. I like him now. But I thought he had passed us. I despised the boy. I thought he was arrogant. Now he's coming back to do press. Now he's my new best friend. I love the shallowness of it all. And you're Canadian, I hear. What's that about?
Well, it's a fantastic country. What is that about?
That was my question, Gary.
I know. I'm trying to. I've never actually had.
But eventually the show will start. Don't you want to just finally answer it?
Yeah. What is it about? For me? It's been a fantastic. It's where I come from, and it's
what?
Canada.
You're Canadian. I didn't know that.
I've been seeing that movie get some love lately online.
I saw somebody on Twitter today say something like, why isn't Primetime Glick on a streaming service? And it's so Michael McKean as the like band leader who plays the harp. It's so good.
Oh, yeah. I haven't watched it in a long time, and yeah, why is it not streaming?
They're great.
Yeah. So The Lost Boys, I would love to, and yes, I would have loved to have seen Joel Schumacher do Batman like this.
You know what? Because I don't know, because I know that if we do talk about the movie I'm about to mention, seeing as how Joel Schumacher has passed, I probably would have suggested he direct a remake given his history, but I would have loved to have seen a Joel Schumacher Mannequin.
A Joel Schumacher Mannequin?
Yeah, remake Mannequin. Joel Schumacher directs it. What? You look at me like I'm crazy, but it's like, this is a movie I want to see.
I mean, I'd come to he did comedy early in his career with, DC Cab.
Why does it have to be comedy?
Why does it? Oh, yikes. Oh, it could be like a Fatal Attraction.
This is about a person who has been cursed.
It's an erotic thriller. It's a supernatural erotic thriller.
Yeah.
And representation, we will get an Egyptian actress.
And who is, if nothing else, the king of the erotic thriller, the star of next week's movie, Michael Douglas, because we're going to do Falling Down.
Would Michael Douglas play Hollywood and just do his Liberace bit, or?
Ooh. No, he would be the G.W. Bailey character.
Oh my God.
He would be the mall security guard.
All right, stop, because I really want to see this, and it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But before we our next movie is going to be Joel Schumacher's 1993 film Falling Down.
Yeah.
But before we do, from Lost Boys, what would you say are kind of those elements that make it a Joel Schumacher movie?
That's a great question. I feel like I'm only starting to get my mind really into who Joel Schumacher was as a director, because, I've watched his movies independently throughout time, but never as a cluster until right now. So I'd like you to ask me that question when we get to our final Joel movie, and we can come back and talk about them, because
I want to keep throwing that around. Yeah,
because still, my mind is the shine and sheen of Joel Schumacher. And hey, you know what? Maybe the thing that makes this movie a Joel Schumacher movie to me is Tim Cappello. Maybe it is the look of the vampire. Actually, I heard that when Richard Donner first tapped Joel Schumacher to direct this, the first thing that he did was kind of imagine their look and what they would wear. And I think that if I was to answer right now and ask me again after Joel is over, but I feel like my answer would be the look of the vampires, the fashion of everybody. I think that would be it.
Yeah, I really think that style, fashion are, in his DNA as a filmmaker. That and music.
Yeah, music.
The constant use of
which is funny because, and we're going to talk bits about this in the next episode, but Falling Down feels like such an outlier because we don't have any of these elements really.
Not in the way that we see them in The Lost Boys. No. I would suggest that we do, that they manifest in certain ways.
Sure. And we will talk about that on the next episode.
Very, very much so.
Which we're going to record in about an hour.
Yeah. Well, on that note, a good journey.
A good journey.